Anunnaki Protocol. Chapter 1. The Cradle and the Clouds. The story of the Mesopotamians is the story of firsts. Nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, in the modern-day region of Iraq, Kuwait, and Syria, the Sumerians built the world's first urban civilization around 4000 BCE. They didn't just survive, they engineered. They gave us the wheel, the 60-minute hour, and cuneiform, the first system of writing. But to the Mesopotamians, they weren't alone in their achievements. Every canal dug and city wall raised was done under the watchful, often fickle eyes of the Anunnaki. Who were the Mesopotamians? The people of Mesopotamia, Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians, were master organizers. They transformed a marshy floodplain into a network of city-states like Uruk and Ur. The worldview, they saw the universe as a cosmic state. Just as the city had a king, the cosmos had a hierarchy. The records. Thanks to their clay tablets, we don't have to guess. They recorded everything from beer recipes to profound laments about the gods. Who were the Anunnaki? The term Anunnaki, or Anunna, literally translates to those of royal blood or offspring of En, and was the sky god, the original patriarch of the pantheon. In their records, the Anunnaki weren't aliens in the modern sci-fi sense, but they were certainly other. They were a group of elite deities who decided the fates of humanity, the Great Triad. The heavy hitters were in sky, Enlil, air/storms, and Enki, water/wisdom. The relationship. Unlike modern religions centered on personal salvation, Mesopotamian religion was a service contract. Humans were created to provide the gods with food, sacrifices, and housing, temples, freeing the gods from the manual labor of maintaining the earth. What we actually know. Our knowledge comes from thousands of excavated tablets, most notably the Enuma Elish, the creation myth, and the Atrahasis epic. When the gods, like men, bore the work and suffered the toil of the gods was great, the work was heavy, the distress was much. Opening lines of the Atrahasis epic. From these texts, we know the Mesopotamians viewed the Anunnaki as physical beings who lived in house temples, Ziggurats. They felt hunger, anger, and regret. If the river flooded, Enlil was likely having a bad day. If the crops grew, Enki had shared his wisdom. The Anunnaki were the architects of order in a chaotic world, and the Mesopotamians were their earthly project managers. Chapter 2. The great work and the rival brothers. As the Mesopotamian cities grew, so did the complexity of their myths. At the heart of the human story lies a cosmic labor dispute and a legendary sibling rivalry between two sons of the sky god Enlil and Enki the divine strike. According to the Atrahasis epic, the world was originally divided among the gods. Enlil ruled the earth's surface, while Enki governed the Abzu, the freshwater ocean beneath the earth. For thousands of years, the lesser gods, the Igigi, were forced to do the grueling work of digging the Tigris and Euphrates rivers and maintaining the irrigation canals. Eventually, the Igigi revolted. They burned their tools and surrounded Enlil's temple. To prevent a civil war in the heavens, Enki, the god of wisdom, craft, and mischief, proposed a radical solution. The creation of a substitute, the creation of humanity. Enki, with the help of the mother goddess Nintu, or Ninhursag, fashioned the first humans out of a mixture of clay from the earth, the blood of a sacrificed god, Kingu or Wiilu, which provided the spirit or intellect. The goal was simple. Humans would take up the shovels and baskets, and the gods would be fed by the steam of human sacrifices. We were designed to be the maintenance crew of the cosmos. Enki versus Enlil, the architect versus the administrator. The relationship between the two brothers defined the human experience. They represented the two sides of nature, its life-giving potential and its destructive power. Feature Enki, the savior, Enlil, the judge, domain the Abzu, deep waters, wisdom, arts, the atmosphere, storms, authority. View on humans, protectors. He saw us as his clever children, nuisances. He saw us as a noisy workforce. Key action warned humanity of the Great Flood. Sent the Great Flood to wipe humanity out. The noise of mankind. As humanity thrived, we became too many and too loud. Enlil, who valued order and quiet, found he could no longer sleep because of the uproar of the human population. This friction is a recurring theme in Mesopotamian lore. the tension between the chaotic growth of civilization, Enki's realm, and the rigid desire for divine silence, Enlil's realm. While Enlil sought ways to curb the population through famine and drought, Enki was always in the shadows, whispering secrets to his favorite humans on how to survive. This set the stage for the ultimate confrontation between the brothers, the decision to send a deluge that would wash the slate clean. Chapter 3: The Deluge and the Secret of Shurapak. The tension between the divine brothers finally reached a breaking point. The clamor of humanity had become an unbearable din to Enlil. In a secret assembly of the Anunnaki, Enlil convinced the council to swear a solemn oath. They would release a catastrophic flood to silence the earth forever. The divine whistleblower, Enki, bound by his oath to the council, could not speak directly to any human. However, his loyalty to his creations, and perhaps his rivalry with Enlil, pushed him to find a loophole. He traveled to the reed hut of a king named Ziggurats, known as Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh and Atrahasis in older texts. Instead of speaking to the man, Enki spoke to the wall of the hut. "Wall, listen to me. Reed wall, pay attention to my words. Destroy your house, build a boat. Spurn possessions, save life." By whispering to the wall, Enki technically kept his oath while ensuring his favorite human received the blueprints for survival. The storm and the 7 days the boat was not a standard ship, but a massive, multi-decked cube reinforced with bitumen pitch. Ziggurats loaded it with his family, craftsmen, gold, silver, and the seed of all living creatures. Then the sky turned black. The Epic of Gilgamesh describes the storm as so terrifying that even the gods were afraid. They cowered like dogs against the walls of heaven, realizing that without humans to feed them, they too would go hungry. For 7 days and nights, the storm raged until the earth was a flat, gray expanse of water. The sacrifice and the rainbow. When the waters receded and the boat grounded on Mount Nimush, Ziggurats stepped out and immediately offered a sacrifice. The aroma of the roasting meat rose to the heavens. The gods, starving from the week-long fast, hovered like flies over the smoke. Enlil arrived, furious that a human had survived. But Enki intervened, arguing that instead of a total flood, Enlil should use lions, wolves, or famine to control the population, tools that were selective rather than absolute. The aftermath: immortality and order. To appease Enlil and honor the survival of the human race, the gods made a compromise: mortality. Humans were given a shorter lifespan and certain biological checks, like infertility or infant mortality, to ensure they never became too loud for Enlil again. Apotheosis: Ziggurats and his wife were granted immortality and taken to live at the mouth of the rivers, the Mesopotamian equivalent of paradise. This story served as the blueprint for later flood myths, including the biblical story of Noah, though with a distinctly corporate Mesopotamian twist. Survival was the result of a divine whistleblower playing the system. Chapter 4: Ziggurats, the Stairways to Heaven. In the flat, sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia, the horizon was broken by massive, terraced mountains of mud brick. These were the Ziggurats. To the Mesopotamians, these weren't just buildings, they were the literal mooring posts where the heavens anchored themselves to the earth, the architecture of the gods. The word ziggurat comes from the Akkadian zakaru, meaning to build on a high area or to rise high. Unlike Egyptian pyramids, which were smooth-sided tombs for the dead, ziggurats were bustling centers of life and administration for the living. The structure, they were built in receding tiers, often numbering 3 to 7 levels. The material, because stone was scarce, millions of sun-dried mud bricks were used, held together with bitumen, natural asphalt, and layers of reeds. The summit. At the very top sat the high temple. This was the bedroom of the god, where they would descend to eat, sleep, and commune with the high priests, living with the Anunnaki. The Mesopotamians believed that the Anunnaki actually resided within these structures. The city of Nippur belonged to Enlil, the city of Eridu belonged to Enki, and Babylon was the seat of Marduk. The relationship was intensely physical, feeding the god. Twice a day, priests would lay out lavish banquets for the cult statue of the god, featuring fine flour, dates, honey, and meat. Dressing the god. The statues were draped in expensive garments and jewelry. The high priest's role, only the highest-ranking priests were allowed into the summit temple. It was here that they received the divine decrees or data packets that contained the rules for civilization, technology, and law. The stairway theory. Because of their height and the way they bridged the gap between the ground and the sky, many modern theorists and ancient enthusiasts have looked at ziggurats as more than just temples. In the Enuma Elish, the gods themselves build the city of Babylon and its ziggurat, Enki, the house of the platform of heaven and earth. It was described as a place where the gods could rest during their travels. This has led to the popular, though historically debated, idea of the ziggurat as a landing pad or gateway. Its top reaches the sky, its foundation is laid in the breast of the netherworld. A common Mesopotamian description of a ziggurat. The Tower of Babel connection. The most famous ziggurat in history is likely the one that inspired the biblical Tower of Babel. When the Neo-Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II rebuilt the Enki in Babylon, it stood nearly 300 feet tall. To travelers from the desert, this shimmering, multicolored mountain of brick looked like a literal ladder to the stars, reinforcing the idea that the Anunnaki were never truly far away, they were just upstairs. Chapter 5. The Vanishing Gods and the Modern Myth. By the time the Persian Empire rose and Alexander the Great marched through the gates of Babylon, the Anunnaki had begun to fade. The once vibrant ziggurats crumbled into tells, great mounds of dust and broken brick, as the languages of Sumer and Akkad were replaced. But the Anunnaki didn't truly disappear. They changed form, from temples to tablets. The gods left history as the political centers of the world shifted. As the Mesopotamian cities were abandoned due to changing river courses and soil salination, the cults of Enlil and Enki died out. Their stories, however, were buried in the sand, preserved on millions of clay tablets that waited nearly 2,000 years to be rediscovered by archaeologists in the 19th century. The rise of the ancient astronauts. In the 1970s, the Anunnaki experienced a cultural resurrection, though not in a way a Sumerian priest would recognize. Authors like Zecharia Sitchin popularized a radical reinterpretation of the cuneiform texts. The theory, Sitchin claimed the Anunnaki were not mythical gods, but extraterrestrials from a hidden planet called Nibiru. The narrative, he argued they came to Earth 450,000 years ago to mine gold to fix their planet's atmosphere, using genetic engineering to create humans as a slave race. The conflict. While this narrative is a staple of modern sci-fi and ancient aliens theories, mainstream historians and linguists point out that Sitchin's translations often deviated significantly from the actual Sumerian grammar and context. Why the myth persists. The fascination with the Anunnaki remains powerful today because it sits at the intersection of our oldest history and our future aspirations. Explaining the jump. Civilization in Mesopotamia appeared with startling speed. The Anunnaki myth provides an easy answer for how humans went from hunter-gatherers to master astronomers and legal scholars seemingly overnight. The creator archetype. The idea of engineered humanity, seen in Chapter 2, resonates with modern discussions about AI and genetic editing. We see ourselves in the stories of Enki, the tinkerer who created life from clay and spirit. The cosmic connection. Even without the alien label, the Mesopotamian view that we are connected to the stars remains a poetic and compelling part of the human experience. The real legacy. The true legacy of the Anunnaki isn't found in secret planets or hidden gold mines. It's found in the 60-second minute, the 12-month calendar, and the written laws we still live by today. The Mesopotamians looked at the stars and saw their masters. We look at the same stars and see our history, whether they were divine beings, psychological metaphors for nature, or simply the creative spark of the world's first writers. The Anunnaki remain the foundation of the House of History. Chapter 6. The Shadows of Deep Time and Lost Tech. As we peel back the layers of Mesopotamian history, we encounter a series of anomalies that challenge the standard timeline of human progress. While conventional history places the rise of Sumer around 4000 BCE. A growing body of alternative perspectives suggests the Anunnaki and the civilization they fostered might be the inheritance of a much older, significantly more advanced epoch. The deep time hypotheses. If the Anunnaki were indeed, as the Sumerians described, beings who descended to establish kingship, the question remains, when did this actually happen? The Younger Dryas connection. Some researchers point to the end of the last ice age, approx. 10,800 BCE, as the true era of the Anunnaki. This theory suggests that a global cataclysm, the Great Flood, destroyed a sophisticated pre-Sumerian civilization, leaving the survivors to reboot humanity in Mesopotamia with leftover knowledge. The Sumerian King List. This actual archaeological artifact lists kings who allegedly reigned for tens of thousands of years. While historians view these numbers as symbolic, alternative theorists argue they are literal records of a long-lived or technological elite that ruled during a forgotten window of prehistory. Evidence of out-of-place advancement. The Mesopotamians possessed knowledge that seems to leapfrog over the expected steps of evolution. This has led to the idea that they were gifted or trained by a superior intelligence. Complex astronomy. The Sumerians knew of the precession of the equinoxes, a slow wobbling of the Earth's axis that takes 25,920 years to complete one cycle. How a Bronze Age civilization tracked a cycle that lasts nearly 26 millennia without advanced optics remains one of history's greatest puzzles. Precision engineering. The sheer scale of the Ziggurats and the irrigation networks required mathematics that wouldn't be seen again for thousands of years. Some suggest the divine data tablets mentioned in Chapter 4, were actually physical blueprints or encoded sets of instructions for advanced metallurgy and agriculture. The Baghdad Battery. Found in the region of Old Mesopotamia, these clay jars containing copper cylinders and iron rods suggest a rudimentary understanding of galvanization or electricity, potentially used for gold-plating jewelry long before the official discovery of the battery. Alternative perspectives on the gods. Moving away from the traditional mythology label, several compelling theories re-examine who the Anunnaki might have been. 1. The breakaway civilization. This theory posits that the Anunnaki were not from another planet, but were a highly advanced group of Earth-based humans who survived a previous extinction event. Using their superior tech, the god powers, they managed the primitive survivors of the flood, appearing as gods to those they taught. 2. The bioengineers. Drawing from the Atrahasis, Chapter 2, this view looks at the creation of Lulu, the first worker, as a literal description of in vitro fertilization and genetic splicing. Proponents argue that the clay was biological material and the blood of the god was DNA. This would mean the Anunnaki were master geneticists who accelerated human evolution for their own labor needs. 3. The harmonic architects. Some believe the ziggurats and temples were not just places of worship, but power plants or resonance chambers. These theories suggest the Mesopotamians used sacred geometry and sound frequencies taught by the Anunnaki to move massive stones or even generate energy, a technology that was lost as the gods departed. The Anunnaki provided the rules of the game. We are still just playing by them. Common sentiment among alternative historians. Chapter 7, Deep Time, the Ghosts of the Younger Dryas. The deep time hypothesis suggests that the Sumerians weren't the originators of civilization, but the inheritors of one. To understand this, we have to look back much further than 4000 BCE into a turbulent window of Earth's history known as the Younger Dryas, approx. 10,800 to 960 BCE. The Great Discontinuity. Mainstream history views the timeline of human progress as a steady upward slope, from hunter-gatherers to farmers, then to city builders. The deep time hypothesis argues that this slope was actually a cliff. According to this view, a highly advanced civilization, the original Anunnaki, existed during the Ice Age. When a series of cataclysmic events, likely comet fragments hitting the ice caps, caused rapid sea level rises and global flooding, this civilization was erased. The Sumerian story of the Great Flood is therefore not a myth, but a post-traumatic cultural memory of the end of the Ice Age. The Göbekli Tepe problem. For decades, the idea of an advanced civilization existing 12,000 years ago was dismissed. Then, archaeologists discovered Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, just north of Mesopotamia. The date. It was built around 950 BCE, exactly at the end of the Younger Dryas. The tech. It features massive T-shaped stone pillars weighing up to 20 tons, carved with sophisticated animal reliefs. The implication. It was built 6,000 years before Stonehenge. It suggests that a group of people possessed high-level engineering and social organization skills at a time when they were supposed to be simple nomads. Deep time theorists argue this was a seed project established by the surviving Anunnaki to jumpstart civilization after the cataclysm. The Ons phenomenon, teachers from the sea. Mesopotamian tradition speaks of the Apkallu, or the seven sages, led by a figure named Ons. These beings were said to have emerged from the Persian Gulf to teach humans the fundamentals of civilization. They didn't just teach religion, they taught geometry, law, and agriculture. They were often depicted wearing fish-like suits, which alternative theorists interpret as specialized gear for survivors of a maritime or technologically advanced culture navigating a flooded world. Genetic memory or genetic engineering. A core pillar of the deep time hypothesis involves the sudden appearance of domesticated crops and livestock. The mystery. Wild grains were transformed into civilized wheat and barley in a blink of geological time. The theory. This wasn't slow selective breeding, but the reintroduction of genetic blueprints saved by the Anunnaki during the deep time era. The Lulu connection. If humans were genetically modified, as discussed in Chapter 2, deep time theorists suggest this happened before the flood. We are not the first iteration of humanity. We are the version 2, designed to survive in a post-cataclysmic world. The remnants in the sand. If a civilization existed for tens of thousands of years before Sumer, why haven't we found their smartphones or steel? The Antikythera logic. Rare finds like the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek analog computer, prove that high technology can exist and then be completely lost for millennia. The perishable nature of tech. In deep time, most technology, if not made of stone or gold, would have been pulverized by glacial shifts and rising oceans. What remained were the stories and the ziggurats, built as sturdy, flood-resistant reminders of a lost era of greatness. Chapter 8. The Anomaly Files, Artifacts of a Higher Order. If the Mesopotamians were simply Bronze Age farmers who stumbled into civilization, their records and relics shouldn't contain the impossible fingerprints we find today. Out of place, advancements suggest that the Anunnaki didn't just give the Sumerians a nudge. They provided a technological scaffolding that the human mind, at that stage of evolution, likely couldn't have built on its own. 1. The precession of the equinoxes. Perhaps the most staggering piece of evidence is the Sumerian understanding of axial precession. The Earth doesn't just spin, it wobbles like a slowing top. One full wobble takes approximately 25,920 years. This movement is so slow that it takes about 72 years for the stars to shift just 1 degree in the sky. To track this, you need precise mathematical records kept over centuries, advanced spherical geometry, an understanding that the Earth is a sphere suspended in space. The Sumerians divided the sky into the 12 zodiac signs we use today, knowing exactly when the age would shift. How could a civilization in its infancy measure a cycle that lasts 10 times longer than their own recorded history? 2. The Me, hardware of the gods. In Sumerian texts, the Anunnaki possessed objects called the Me, pronounced May. These were described as physical objects, sometimes worn, sometimes held, that contained the laws of civilization. However, the Me weren't just laws like the 10 Commandments. They included the Me of metallurgy, the Me of basket weaving, the Me of scribeship, the Me of godship/authority. In the myth of Inanna and Enki, Inanna literally steals these me from a drunken Enki and loads them onto her boat of heaven to take back to her city. Alternative theorists suggest the me were data storage devices, compact tablets or crystals containing the technical blueprints, the code required to run a high-functioning society. When a city had the me, it had the tech. 3. Precision masonry and the vitrification mystery. While Sumer is famous for brick, the surrounding areas influenced by the Anunnaki culture, like the Hittite sites or the foundations of Baalbek, show stone-cutting precision that defies the capabilities of copper chisels. The diorite statues, Gudea of Lagash commissioned statues made of diorite, one of the hardest stones on Earth, harder than iron. To carve these with the level of anatomical detail seen in the artifacts would require diamond-tipped tools or high-speed rotary cutters. Vitrification. In several ancient Mesopotamian and Indus sites, we find mud brick walls that have been vitrified, turned into glass. This requires temperatures exceeding 1,100 degrees C, 2,000 degrees F. In a pre-industrial world, achieving such sustained, focused heat is an anomaly that some suggest points to the use of high-energy, divine, weaponry, or industrial tools. 4. The sexagesimal system, base minus 60. We still use Sumerian math every time we look at a clock or a compass. While most civilizations chose base minus 10 because we have 10 fingers, the Sumerians chose base minus 60. Why 60? It is a perfect number for complex calculations, as it is divisible by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. This system allows for the calculation of massive astronomical distances and microscopic angles with 0 repeating decimals. It is a system designed for navigation and engineering, not for counting sheep in a field. It feels less like a natural human discovery and more like a mathematical gift optimized for high-level physics. 5. The Baghdad battery and electroplating. Found just outside Baghdad, these 5-inch-tall clay jars contained a copper cylinder and an iron rod. When filled with an electrolyte like vinegar or grape juice, they produce about 0.8 to 4 volts. While skeptics argue they were just scrolls containers, the presence of bitumen seals to prevent leaks and the discovery of gold-plated jewelry in Grave suggests the Mesopotamians may have been using electrochemistry thousands of years before Alessandro Volta. If the Anunnaki were technological beings, providing the secret to gold plating through chemistry would be a simple way to give their temple servants the tools to create divine shimmering artifacts. Chapter 9. Beyond the Heavens, Reimagining the Anunnaki. When we move past the traditional image of bearded deities sitting on clouds, we enter a realm where the gods are redefined through the lenses of physics, biology, and high-level sociology. If the Anunnaki were not supernatural entities, what else could they have been? 1. The breakaway civilization, the Elders of Earth. One of the most grounded alternative theories suggests the Anunnaki were not from the stars at all. Instead, they were a remnant population of a previous highly advanced human civilization. The theory, before the Younger Dryas cataclysm, Chapter 7, humanity had already reached a high-tech peak. When the world was destroyed, a small percentage of the elite, the Anunnaki, survived in fortified, high-altitude or subterranean locations. The strategy, when they emerged, they realized they didn't have the numbers to rebuild the world alone. They descended to the fertile plains of Mesopotamia and presented themselves as gods to the primitive survivors. The evidence. This explains why the gods in Sumerian myth are so human. They eat, drink, argue, and have complex family trees. They weren't magical, they were just the keepers of the old world technology. 2. The bioengineers, creators of the Lulu. In the Atrahasis epic, the Anunnaki say, "Let the midwife create a human being, let man assume the drudgery of the god." Alternative thinkers view this as a literal description of genetic splicing. The splicing theory. This perspective suggests that the clay used to create humans was actually biological ova, and the blood of the god was a donor's DNA. The result was the Lulu Amilu, the adapted worker. The missing link. Proponents argue this explains the great leap forward in human evolution. the sudden expansion of the human brain, and the mysterious missing link that anthropologists have sought for decades, the purpose. Under this view, we were a designer species, engineered with the intelligence to follow complex instructions like building ziggurats, but without the long-term longevity of our creators. 3. The interdimensional hypothesis. Some researchers, influenced by modern quantum physics, suggest the Abzu, the watery abyss where Enki lived, and the heaven of An were not physical places in space, but parallel dimensions. The theory. The Anunnaki were interdimensional beings who could phase into our reality. The Ziggurats served as frequency anchors, monolithic structures that, through their specific geometry and mass, allowed these beings to stabilize their presence in our 3D world. The me as keys. In this context, the me, the data tablets, were not just blueprints, but the mathematical codes required to open portals or stargates between these layers of reality. 4. The custodial hypothesis. The management team, often referred to as the breakaway management theory, this perspective sees the Anunnaki as a corporate-like entity tasked with the Earth project. The Enlil versus Enki dynamic. This wasn't just a sibling rivalry. It was a conflict over resource management. Enlil represented the corporate office, focused on efficiency, order, and eventually terminating the project, the flood, when it became too noisy and unprofitable. Enki was the lead engineer who had gone native. He developed an emotional attachment to his product, humanity, and committed industrial espionage by warning Ziusudra about the flood. The departure. This theory suggests that the Anunnaki didn't die. They simply reached the end of their contract or shifted their operations to a level of observation rather than direct management, leaving us with the me to run our own civilization. 5. The archetypal reflection. From a psychological perspective, some argue that the Anunnaki represent the first human encounter with the higher self. The theory. As the human brain evolved, we began to perceive the laws of nature, storms, water, mathematics, as external personalities. The advancement. Under this view, the advancements weren't handed down by aliens, but were the result of a massive, collective aha moment in the human psyche. The Anunnaki are the personification of the inner genius that allowed us to suddenly understand the stars and the soil. Chapter 10, The King List and the Me, the Code of Immortality. To truly grasp the scale of the Anunnaki's influence, we have to look at the two most baffling data sets left behind by the Sumerians. The Sumerian King List, SKL, a chronological record of impossible lifespans, and the Me, the mysterious physical objects that acted as the operating system for human civilization. The Sumerian King List, the long chronology. The SKL is a stone prism inscribed with the names of rulers, their cities, and the length of their reigns. It is divided into two distinct eras by a single world-shattering event, the Flood. 1. The antediluvian pre-flood kings. The list begins with a statement that sounds more like a landing log than a history book. After the kingship lowered from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. In this pre-flood section, the reigns are measured in SARS, units of 36,000 years. The numbers are staggering. Alulim ruled for 28,800 years. Alaunga ruled for 36,000 years. Enmenluana ruled for 43,200 years. Totaling these up, the first dynasty of the Anunnaki-linked kings lasted for 241,200 years. 2. The post-flood crash. After the flood, the list notes that kingship was lowered from heaven again. But something had changed. The reigns immediately dropped from tens of thousands of years to mere centuries, like the 1,200-year reign of Enmakar, and eventually to normal human lifespans. Alternative perspective. If we don't dismiss these numbers as myth, they suggest two possibilities: biological superiority. The original Anunnaki rulers had a different genetic makeup or access to life extension technology that was lost after the atmospheric changes of the flood. Relativistic time. If these rulers were extraterrestrial or interdimensional, the 28,800 years might represent their time dilation relative to Earth, or perhaps their reign refers to the duration of a specific technological orbit. The Me, the universal software. While the King List tells us who ruled, the Me tell us how they ruled. In Sumerian texts, the Me, pronounced Me, are described as a set of physical objects, often depicted as small tablets or radiant garments, that contain the fundamental programs of reality. The operating system theory. In the myth Inanna and Enki, the goddess Inanna travels to Eridu to visit Enki, the keeper of the Me. While Enki is intoxicated, Inanna convinces him to give her over 100 Me. These weren't just abstract ideas, they were loaded onto her boat of heaven. The list of Me included the Me of kingship and victory, political power, the Me of truth and falsehood, social ethics, the Me of metalworking and weaving, industrial tech, the Me of music and prostitution, culture/biological drives, the Me of the ascent and descent, travel tech, the hardware connection. Alternative theorists argue the Me were highly advanced storage devices, perhaps crystalline or biodigital, that held the source code for civilization. If you possessed the Me of metallurgy, you didn't just have a book about copper. You had the automated blueprints and chemical formulas required to manifest the industry. He who possesses the Me possesses the power to command the functions of the world. Sumerian proverb, the Stargate theory of Babylon. Because the Me and the kingship were lowered from heaven, many researchers look at the locations mentioned in the King List, Eridu, Bad Tabira, Shuruppak, as more than just cities. They are viewed as technical hubs. The city of Babylon, Babalu, literally translates to Gate of the Gods. Some suggest that the Me were used at these gate sites to facilitate communication or transport between the Anunnaki's home and Earth. When the Me was stolen or lost, the cities lost their technological edge, eventually crumbling into the mud brick ruins we see today. Chapter 11. The chronology of the gods and the gates of Babylon. To understand the Anunnaki is to confront a timeline that defies human biology and a geography that hints at cosmic transit. Here we look at the literal data of the Sumerian King List and the persistent theory that the cradle of civilization was actually a network of interstellar terminals, the King List. A ledger of immortals. The Sumerian King List, SKL, is not a piece of folklore. It is an official administrative record found on multiple artifacts, the most famous being the Weld-Blundell prism. It meticulously records the transfer of kingship from one city to another, but the numbers for the antediluvian, pre-flood era are what stop modern historians in their tracks. The Great Eight and their reigns before the flood swept across the earth. The list identifies 8 kings who ruled across 5 cities. Their durations are measured in Sars, 36.0 years, and Nurs, 600 years. King City reign length, years, Alulim Eridu 28,800 Alaunga, Eridu 36,000 Enmen Luana Bad Tabira, 43,200 Enmen Galana Bad Tabira, 28,800 Jumuzid. The Shepherd Bad Tabira, 36,000 Ensipad Zidana, Larak, 28,800 Enmen Durana Sipar, 21,000 Ubaratutu Shuruppak, 18,600 total duration. 241,200 years of divine rule. The biological anomaly. Conventional history argues these numbers are hyperbolic or symbolic. However, if these rulers were part of a deep time civilization, Chapter 7, these reigns might indicate a biological lifespan far superior to our own. Or perhaps the names refer to dynastic titles that lasted for millennia. The Stargate theory. Babylon and the portals. The name Babylon comes from the Akkadian Babili, which literally translates to Gate of the Gods. While religious scholars see this as a metaphorical entrance to a temple, alternative researchers suggest a more technical meaning. A wormhole or teleportation hub. 1. The Ziggurat as a frequency anchor. The Etemenanki, the Tower of Babel, was built to reach into the heavens. Unlike modern skyscrapers, its purpose wasn't office space. It was a connection point. The theory. The specific geometry of the Ziggurat, combined with its massive quartz-rich brickwork, acted as a transceiver. The Me connection. The Me tablets. Chapter 10 were the encryption keys or hardware required to open the gate at the summit of the tower. 2. The Ishtar Gate, More than decoration, the famous Ishtar Gate, with its vibrant blue-glazed bricks and depictions of dragons, sirush, and bulls, is often cited in these theories. The blue bitumen. The specific blue lapis lazuli finish was extremely rare and difficult to produce. Some suggest the color and material were chosen for their conductive properties or to mark a safe zone for a rival, the sirush dragon. This creature doesn't exist in the fossil record. Alternative thinkers suggest it was a biological guardian brought through the gate from another environment, an exotic creature from the Anunnaki's home realm 3. The 1920s, Stargate, rumors, a popular modern legend often found in whistleblower circles, suggests that the real reason for various geopolitical conflicts in Iraq over the last century wasn't just oil, but the discovery of a physical, ancient portal buried beneath the ruins of Babylon or Ur. Proponents point to the fact that the great Ziggurat of Ur was reconstructed by modern governments with extreme haste and military precision, suggesting that something more than a tourist attraction was being secured. The conclusion of the kingly line, the King List, ends the pre-flood section with a chillingly brief sentence. Then the flood swept over. When the kingship returned from heaven afterward, the rains dropped to human levels, 140 years, 100 years, and eventually the 20-30-year rains we recognize today. Whether the gate of the gods was a spiritual metaphor or a literal portal, the Mesopotamians were convinced of one thing. Their world was once a place where the barrier between Earth and the stars was as thin as a temple door. The echoes in the dust. The story of the Mesopotamians and the Anunnaki is not a closed book, but a series of scattered pages waiting for a reader brave enough to piece them together. We are left standing in the shadow of the Ziggurats, looking up at the same stars that the Sumerian astronomers tracked with impossible precision 6 millennia ago. The unanswered questions. Despite our advancements in archaeology and linguistics, the cradle of civilization remains shrouded in a persistent mist. We are left to grapple with mysteries that challenge our understanding of our own origins. If the Sumerian King List is a mere fantasy, why does it transition so seamlessly into historically verified rulers? If the Anunnaki were simply myths, why did an entire civilization, one that invented the wheel and the written word, insist they were physical beings who walked the earth? And what of the me? Are we currently rediscovering the technology that was once stored on those ancient tablets, moving from the age of clay to the age of silicon, the horizon of discovery? Today, over 90% of Mesopotamian tablets remain unread or untranslated in the basements of museums and private collections. Every year, the shifting sands of Iraq and Syria reveal new tells and hidden chambers. We may be one shovel turn away from finding a me tablet that functions or a star map that points directly to a home we never knew we had. The Anunnaki may have departed to the heavens or slipped into the abzu of deep time, but they left behind a blueprint. We live in a world they allegedly designed, measuring our time by their numbers, building our laws on their foundations, and staring at the sky with their curiosity. The past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. LP. Partly in the case of Mesopotamia, the past may be a foreign planet or a forgotten dimension. The mystery doesn't end here, it only deepens. Whether you view the Anunnaki as ancient astronauts, sophisticated survivors of a lost epoch, or the powerful archetypes of the human subconscious, one thing is certain. The conversation between the Earth and the stars is far from over. The end.